Hello and welcome. Today we are going to be exploring the lexicology of the word luster. But right off the top, I do want to add a warning. This topic involves instances of animal exploitation and sacrifice. I will not be speaking graphically on these issues, but if they are something that you are sensitive to, then I recommend skipping this episode and I hope to see you next time. And with that said, let's begin. As I mentioned, in this video we are going to be talking about the history and etymology of the word luster. To start off, let's define what the word means. The exact definitions of luster vary from source to source, but generally have a great deal of commonality. The first being a quality of shine or radiance by reflecting light, a substance that would impart a sheen such as a polish, a radiance of beauty, attractiveness of outward appearance, and in mineralogy it is used to describe a reflective surface. The noun forms of luster can either mean a glass pendant usually used in a chandelier to reflect light, and finally, luster can be defined as a period of 5 years. And I know this last definition sounds a bit out of place, but it is actually integral to the history of luster and hints at the source of its etymology, so we will be covering that in detail later on in the episode. But for now, we will be discussing luster's more common uses. In ancient Rome, brides were traditionally dressed in yellow veils, unlike the white dresses popular in most Western cultures or the red dresses of many Eastern ones. The reason for this is that yellow was looked at as a flame, and thus the wives were torches, bringing light to their husbands. What is interesting about this ideology is that it has been echoed intentionally or unintentionally in the creation of modern wedding dresses. Silk, or a man-made substitute such as nylon, is one of the most popular fabrics used in wedding gowns. The main reason for this is that silk is considered to be quite luxurious and indicative of wealth. But what is it about silk that makes it so revered? It is supple, strong, and drapes beautifully, but the signature attribute that makes silk so alluring is its unique, natural luster. In general, the luminosity of silk is greatly dependent on how it is harvested. Most of the silks that we see being made into garments or home furnishings are the result of sericulture, the production of cultivated silk, which is where silk moth caterpillars, known more commonly as silkworms, are essentially farm-raised, being fed a diet of fresh mulberry leaves. In the wild, the silkworms have also been known to feed on oak or cherry leaves as well, which may affect the color and quality of the silk that is produced by them. Once the caterpillars have reached 10,000 times the weight they were at the time they hatched, they begin spinning a cocoon casing of liquid silk through 2 spinnerets in their head, the fiber solidifying once it comes into contact with the air. In a matter of days, the silkworm will spin about a mile's worth of filament, encasing itself completely in its chrysalis. After this is complete, the silkworms are usually culled using heat, typically by boiling, to avoid the filament being compromised once the moth emerges, and the process of unwinding the cocoon to harvest the silk can begin. Each cocoon yields roughly 1,000 yards of ideally unbroken fiber. This makes silk the longest natural fiber, mitigating inconsistencies such as breakage and frayed ends, allowing for its distinctive texture and luster. Wild silk is available. A common form is called tussa, which is coarser and darker than that produced in sericulture. The rougher texture is due to the fibers being broken when the moth emerged from the chrysalis, though diet and the specific caterpillar species also play a role in the uniformity of the fiber. These factors also compromise the luminosity of the fiber, which is why cultivated silk is much more popular than its more natural and humane counterpart. Although it should be noted that the pupae that were culled in the boiling process have been known to be consumed by people in silk-producing areas, so they are not put to waste. The soft luster of silk, along with the status that comes with the high price tag, is what has made silk such a beloved fabric for brides to wear on their wedding day. As the bride walks down the aisle, the unique luster of the silk reflects the ambient light in a soft, diffused glow. This radiance gives the dress and the wearer an angelic appearance, which, in addition to being ethereal and lovely, also plays into the idea of purity that modern interpretations have come to associate with brides on their wedding day. The radiance of silk can be attributed to the triangular prism-like structure of the fiber, which refracts light from different angles, producing its signature shine. But items with a lustrous appearance can be found elsewhere in nature as well. It is used in mineralogy to describe the way that light interacts or reflects off the surface of crystals, rocks, or minerals. The standards for how luster is classified in this context are very fluid. There are certain types of luster such as greasy luster, which could reference something like opal or jadeite, metallic luster for pyrite or magnetite, waxy luster such as jade, vitreous luster or luster that looks like broken glass such as quartz or tourmaline, to name a few. These exist on a continuum, so there are no hard boundaries between the different types of luster, and indeed certain specimens may be classified as a combination, such as metallic vitreous. There are also other optical effects that are considered to be a form of luster. An example would be asterism, where the mineral displays a star-shaped luminous area, or similarly, a chatoyancy effect, where the mineral will display bands of light. This effect can be found in the popular tiger's eye gemstone, which is usually comprised of metamorphic rock. As a side note, chatoyancy, or chatoyant, comes from the French chatoyer, which means to change in gleam or luster, like a cat's eye. This is derived from the French chat, meaning cat. The luster of a mineral surface is dependent on the refraction power, the structure, and the diaphaneity, or degree of transparency. Variations of these three properties allow for different lustrous effects to take place, whereas changes in the quantity of reflected light affect the intensity of the luster. However, even though luster is currently a term used almost exclusively in reference to an aesthetic quality, its roots are quite complex. Luster is derived from a Middle French word, lustre, which can mean a soft sheen, gloss, or shine, or a chandelier. Middle French took this word from the Old Italian lustro, which also means something shiny or glossy. This comes from the Latin lustro, which has several meanings that can be used in separate or overlapping contexts, which we will explore in just a moment. Lustro itself comes from the Latin lustrum, which is used in general to refer to a period of 5 years. However, what it is specifically referencing is the period of 5 years between censuses which were conducted in ancient Rome. The 5-year census period culminated in the lustration, a purification ritual where 3 animals were sacrificed, not necessarily as an act to incur divine favor, but instead as an act of atonement for past transgressions, so that the people and the land they worked may be purified. This sacrifice was known as a suveturalia, and involved the use of a pig, a sheep, and a bull, who were called in the name of the deity Mars. For public ceremonies known as suveturalia maiora, full-grown boars, sheep, and bulls were used. However, in smaller ceremonies, suveturalia lactantia, used for purifying private fields, a pig, lamb, and calf were sacrificed instead. These sacrifices were performed for various occasions, such as the birth of a child, in order to purify it and rid it of harmful spirits, not unlike the modern ritual of baptism, but it is also used to purify cities, objects, crime scenes, the grounds of destroyed temples, and there was even an occasion where the Roman Emperor Trajan is depicted as performing a Suvroturalia to purify the Roman army. Oftentimes, part of the ceremony would involve walking the animals around the circumference of the area meant to be purified, during which several prayers would be spoken. After the ritual was performed, the hope was to receive a series of good omens, which it is thought may be found by using the art of haruspicy, the examination and reading of animal entrails. This was thought to be a method of communication with the gods, although this form of divination was less about predicting the future and more focused on discerning the gods' attitudes or opinions, and reacting accordingly in order to maintain balance between the human and divine realms. These Lūstroms began in 566 BCE, in the reign of King Servius, and continued every 5 years until 74 CE, although occasionally the ritual or even the census fell by the wayside if the Republic was undergoing hard times or unfortunate events. Strictly speaking, these rituals took place every 5 modern years. In actuality, to the ancient Romans, it was more like every 6 years, since they used the Roman calendar, which only consisted of 304 days. The calendar that we use now is referred to as the Gregorian calendar, named for Pope Gregory XIII, who implemented it in 1582. What is interesting is that the calendars almost perfectly align every 5 Gregorian years and 6 Roman years, by pure coincidence. However, the Roman calendar falls just 2 days short per lustrum, leading to the creation of a leap month of 24 days, which was observed every 11th lustrum. Lustrum itself is traced back to the Old Latin Lūstrum, which has several possible etymologies that are closely related. One of them being the Proto-Indo-European Lūstrom, Lūk meaning to make bright in this context, but can also be broken down to mean bright, to shine, or to see. There is also Lūstrom from Lūch, which is to wash. Lastly being Lūstrom, which comes from Lūch, meaning to expiate or to atone. Luster came to be attached to the concept of lustrum through a series of related words that connect the two, one of them being lustro, which, as I mentioned, has several varying definitions. One being, I purify by means of sacrifice. I circle or move around in a circle. I wander. I observe, review, examine. I illuminate. What is most interesting is how nuanced the word is. When we look at how these disparate definitions coalesce during the ritual of lustrum, from walking the animals around the affected land, the sacrifice, the examination and reading of the entrails, and the concept of illuminating, which can be interpreted as polishing or purifying, in this context, lustrum really embodies each definition, even though at face value they seem unrelated. A descendant of lustro would be lustrar, which is where the relation to luster is more solidified. Lustrar is Italian and simply means to polish or shine, which is where we find the focus shifting to aesthetics of an object shining or being illuminated. These are the traits that we most commonly associate with the concept of luster in modern times. However, it should not be overlooked that the idea of polishing and shining has its roots in lustrum's purification ritual. The logic being that in order to purify something, you must make it clean, you must polish it, you must shine it. And this process is how luster was able to evolve over time into the concept that we recognize today. Thank you so much for listening all the way through if you did. Please leave a like if you would like to hear more episodes. Also, feel free to leave a comment if there are any other words you would like to see covered in the future.